We work, we live, we innovate, and create. At the center of it all is your brain health. The ability to solve problems, think analytically, share empathy, and thrive.
We're trying to make brain performance really the next fitness revolution.
Scientific discoveries show that your brain can adapt and grow regardless of your starting point. The Center for Brain Health can show you how to transform your mind to work stronger and faster.
We learned from a national poll that 95% of people want to do something about their brains. The problem is they don't know where or how to start. At the Center for Brain Health, we have easy-to-use, scientifically proven tools to provide people a proactive path to do just that, to help people everywhere improve their quality of life through brain health. What's exciting is that it's easy to start, and starting is urgent because we are in a brain health crisis.
So how do you boost your brain power? How can better brain health help you focus on what's most important?
Brain training is a part of the way that we would distinguish ourselves from others. Quite frankly, I think it's going to be commonplace in businesses in years to come.
We are seeing an epidemic of mental health concerns. Stress and overload lead to depression, anxiety, and burnout. Our brains hold the key to navigate these hurdles. It's never too soon to start.
I think the greatest national security threat is pre-K through 12. If we don't take care of educating our young men and women, then we have to ask ourselves, where are we going to be in 20 years?
Research shows training middle schoolers how to think, problem solve, and innovate significantly improves academic achievement. Even more importantly, it enhances confidence and well-being for them to thrive throughout their lives.
It really helps the kid and it builds their stamina. I genuinely credit my success in the classroom from this program.
The key to the future is stronger brain health for individuals and communities. Ready to transform the world with us? Be a part of the brain health revolution. It starts here.
On? Okay, well, yes, here we go. Welcome everybody to Center for Brain Health and to Brain Health Presents. So for those of you who are new or you need a reminder about what Brain Health Presents is, it is bringing the most important and critical issues in brain health to the public to make it accessible and actionable. And so we are so excited tonight to have Sarah here, which I'm going to introduce her shortly. But as Caitlin said, we are going to be having Q&A. And so we want everybody to, in the virtual audience, use the Q&A function. And in this audience, we want you guys to write down your questions and you're going to have an opportunity. Also on your tables, you have a handout that has bios. But on the flip side of it, there's a space to write out your takeaways for tonight. So we want you to be engaged and thinking about what are my lessons learned? What can I take from this? Who and what do I share with those in my life, and what can I do to make this information accessible and actionable for not just myself, but for others as well. We want to thank our sponsors tonight, Terry and John Schaefer, and KERA, who's our exclusive media partner. So thank you, Terry and John, and KERA. So tonight, very, very excited to have Sarah Lenslock. She is the Senior Vice President for Policy and AARP's Policy Research and International Affairs. She has an extensive bio, let me just say that. So that's one of the big things. Another really cool thing that she does is she's the Executive Director of the Global Council on Brain Health. Both of these things require, as you could imagine, a great deal of vision and leadership to be able to drive forward policy that's based on neuroscience. And so clearly that is something that we hold near and dear to our hearts because that is what we are all about. We want to change the way people think about their brains and change policies so that we're enabled to do that. Earlier this year, Sarah authored a correspondence article that was entitled "The Benefits of Brain Health to Our Economies." And this is another thing that's very near and dear to our hearts, as Sandy, Dr. Sandy Chapman, who is going to be interviewing Sarah and is our founder and chief director, coined the term brainomics to talk about the economic impact or burden of good brain health or poor brain health. And I think it's really critical when so much is written about the negative impact and burden of degenerative disease like Alzheimer's disease and other types of brain disease and disorders. It is the right time now to start talking about what is the economic benefit and the boon to having a workforce, to having communities, to having schools, to having across the board 7.8 billion people brain healthier than they were yesterday. So Sandy and Sarah, take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and a big Texas welcome to Sarah. This is her first visit ever to Dallas, so I want her to make this very special. I've only been trying, I told her, for 10 years to get her here, even though our paths have crossed many times. She travels so extensively to spread the word about the important work that AARP is doing. So we're really delighted, and you will be too, as we learn from her and her extensive, broad perspective. And I just said, I hope you haven't traveled too much and not taken care of your own brain health. That wouldn't be good. But we both believe that it's important for every single person here to realize cognitive decline is not inevitable. We should never say that, oh, well, I'm X, so that's why I don't do this. So just remember, that is not the case. Our brain is modifiable every single day by what we do, either in good ways and bad ways, and that's why we're glad that you all joined us tonight to see what are the good ways that you can strengthen your brain. And science reveals that there are simple steps that you can take. Sarah, I'd love for you to start. So how did you, over your career, what was your journey? Just tell us a little bit about what prepared you for this global calling as an international spokesperson for the greatest needs of our adult population.
Well, Sandy, thank you for asking me that question. It actually got me to thinking, because you get so busy doing things, you don't really necessarily look back and think, well, what did prepare me? Like if you were trying to tell somebody what to do. And I'm going to start when I was a very, very young child. No. So actually, I was the youngest child of a intergenerational intermediate family. My oldest sister was 22 years older than I was. My mother was in her 40s when she had me. I was fortunate enough to have a long-lived family, that I had grandparents that were lived to a good long age. But in the history of my family, my grandfather had dementia. They didn't talk about it like that back then. It was senility. And there was this kind of growing up. How do you handle, how do you approach, how do you teach? What are the right ways to deal with people who have issues as they age? And I think that sparked a lifetime of interest in me. And I think a lot of people have stories in their families. Like they know somebody, they have been around somebody. People who work in this field, there's always some personal connection to why people are working in the brain health space. Because when you see and you experience it, it's a very personal thing. But professionally, I went on, I worked on Capitol Hill for a while. I was working in the area of pensions and older adults and tax reform back in the Reagan years. I went to law school. I went to began working at the Department of Justice. I had some international cases that took me and gave me some international experience. And then I had daughters. And my husband was traveling internationally, and I couldn't keep sleeping on the floor of my office at the Department of Justice and take care of these girls. So I looked around for a job, and AARP was looking for somebody to work in impact litigation and start this advocacy group. And so I began to bring some of these issues together. And I was like, oh, I know about old people. My parents are old. But, it turned out to be such a rich and rewarding experience working at AARP. I've been there for 26 years now. And I can tell you I've learned so much over that time because now you guys at the Center for Brain Health, you're working with people of all ages. But when you're talking about people 50 to 100, that's a huge span. And they've lived an entire life of interesting things that have happened to them. So they're very varied by the time that you get them when you're talking 50 to 100. They're so interesting. So then my dad started to experience dementia, and I wondered why wasn't AARP the world's largest aging organization? Why, although I worked in healthcare litigation and health impact, why didn't I know what to do to help my dad? I couldn't understand, and why wasn't AARP doing more about this? And we began to do research to understand. Everybody's interested in the brain, but people think it's a normal part of aging for your brain to decline. And the more I looked into it, the more that I understood that that's not the case. And then the G8 had a summit, invited AARP, the Prime Minister Cameron. The UK is a little older than we are in the United States, like if you're talking about an age perspective. And so they knew politically that there was a big issue in the UK about dementia, and they made a big policy choice to tackle it when they were ahead of the G8. And so they brought the United States and representatives from all over to talk about what were we going to do about the aging population and the crisis that was going to occur. Well, when you work for an AARP and you're in an advocacy organization, you don't think of aging as a crisis. You think of it as the greatest achievement of mankind. So mashing those things up is what prepared me to start working in this space.
Fascinating, really fascinating. So I want to start first with the bottom line up front, because the audience wants to know, what would you say are going to be 3 takeaways that we're going to talk about that you want every single person here to leave with tonight, that AARP would say, this is a message that we want you all to know and that might add something new to the way they're thinking? What are you going to share?
Well, I don't know if this is something new to the way they're thinking. And I'll find out when you start asking questions, right? But the importance of the evidence and the lead up to what we're talking about. This is not a simple thing that is just off the cuff. There have been decades of research and science leading to this, and you've been at the forefront of that, Sandy. Leading that way, collecting the evidence, having a really rigorous approach to understanding what actually works and what doesn't. Because there's so many, frankly, shysters or other things that are out there that are not telling people what is grounded in science. So you really need to have the truth and the evidence behind it. And so the takeaway that you all are here at a place that's pretty unusual, that has taken the evidence and really put it at the heart and the center of of your doing in order to translate and to give you the best possible advice of what to do and how to do it. And so evidence is the most important thing. You might say that's why attorneys in cognitive neurosciences have actually something in common, because we're digging to find the evidence and to present it. But I would say that from a societal approach, that's the importance of having really good hard evidence behind what people are talking about. And then from an individual perspective, we can talk all day about what's good for you. And it's one thing to know it, and it's another thing to do it. So figuring out how to develop healthy habits and stick to it is really important. And I've got 3 takeaways for that. So 1, Start with what's important to you. Why? The motivation. Why is it that brain health might be important to you? Is it because you have a goal? You want to, at 65, dance at your daughter's wedding? Is it at 85 you want, I don't know, to get your new master's degree? You know, what is it that is the why behind why you want good brain health? And then match a goal to it. And the activities that you do to match the goal to it, make it easy, make it sustainable, make it something that fits in your life. Don't say, oh, you know, I know eating right is good for me, so I'm going to go eat all that kale. If you hate kale, don't pick that as the goal, right? Go with spinach or anything else, you know, something that you like. And then once you do it, build on that step-by-step approach. Find something that's fun, easy, and sustainable. And then third and finally, find somebody else who will help you do it. An accountability partner, somebody who might want to keep their brain sharp as they age, who might want to have some shared purpose in life. And then when you slip up, that person is like, you didn't show up on Tuesday for the walk. You know, and so if you have a partner that can help get it across when you slip and you want to keep those healthy habits going.
Those are 3 great takeaways. So we're going to come up with them, and then we're going to test you at the end. So make sure you remember those. They're very important, and we couldn't agree more. So we know that, you know, when you think about when does your brain, you know, start to slip, AARP used to target 50 and older, or maybe they still do, but we know that's not a magic age, and we've got people here in the audience who are younger than 50. Mm-hmm. What would you say to them, the message to them that they need to take action on now if they're in their 20s or 30s or 40s? What should they be thinking? And what would AARP say about them?
It's never too early to start. Actually, I heard that message in your film, so we're thinking along the same lines. The University of Edinburgh did extensive work and studied people over a lifetime. And roughly speaking, about 50% of how you come into your aging years is already in the bank, it's already done. Your education, your socioeconomic conditions, your culture, those things, it's kind of baked in there. But the sooner you start living a healthy lifestyle or have those modifiable lifestyle factors that are healthy, the better off you're going to be across your lifespan. It's never too late to make a difference, but the sooner you start, it's like savings. It's like retirement savings. The sooner you put in the bank, the more you've got for when you need it.
You mean you can't wait till spend all your money until you're 50 and then wish you had some in the bank? That's a good analogy.
That's exactly right. A lottery ticket is not your best insurance policy.
That's true, but that's what we do with our brain, right? We just kind of, and then we don't even start at 50. We just kind of ignore it because we didn't know. So in this age, so many people, you're hearing brain health all over. You know, we've moved into this scientific era of brain health wellness, and people are wanting to know that we're working for valid measures, but why are we just now starting to measure brain health, do you think? Why is it just now? Because, you know, if most of the people in here go to their doctor and say, well, I'm worried about my brain, they do a test for Alzheimer's disease. So why do you think that it's taken us so long to begin to develop valid and reliable measures of brain health?
Well, I think for years it's been assumed that normal aging is equivalent to decline. Don't worry about, you know, there's nothing you can do. Aging, there's just a tremendous aging attitude, ageism and a fatalism about what will happen. And so, frankly, it's the attitudes of our society, it's the attitudes of our healthcare providers. So AARP does a lot of research and nationally representative surveys. We're looking at people's attitudes about this issue, and we ask the same questions about healthcare providers. To healthcare providers that we did older adults, or actually adults 40 plus. And we found that there's just enormous bias, even in the healthcare system, about people's assumptions about what is normal aging and that there would be deterioration. And that's not what you want in your healthcare provider, who you want to be your coach and to help you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So do you think that brain health checkups, tell us about what AARP is doing for their Staying Sharp. There is a measure that you're trying to get people to be aware of. What does it measure, and what do you think people hope to take from that, and where do you think that sits in this area of how we measure brain health?
So actually, we're here in June, and it's Brain Health Awareness Month. And so AARP has an award-winning digital program called Staying Sharp. And it's based on the 6 pillars of brain health, and we can talk a little bit more about what they are. But they're common sense measures like exercise, eating right, social engagement, managing your stress, staying cognitively stimulated, and being social. I think we may talk about social isolation a little bit later. But the idea is a holistic approach to brain health, because there's not any one answer or one path to brain health. But Staying Sharp combines cognitive assessment and lifestyle questions, and it makes recommendations, personalized recommendations based on where you are. And because it's June and Brain Health Month, AARP is making the cognitive assessment free for anybody who is an AARP member. We have more than 38 million members. So Staying Sharp is available for free during this month, and as long as you remain an AARP member, that assessment will be free. And you can take it as many times as you like, every 30 days. So you can take a look at that at stayingsharp.org/June 23, because it's June 2023. But the assessment is something that's really interesting, because people want to know what's normal. People want to know, I've forgotten my keys. They worry as you get to a certain age, because your mind changes as you age, they worry that something's wrong. Right? And so the assessment is designed to give you information about where you are relative to other people, your age, your gender, those kinds of things. And then it tries to give you helpful tips based on the 6 pillars, based on copious evidence that the Global Council has collected, and many other scientists, including the Center for Brain Health, has established, to give you a way to sustain your healthy habits. So assessments are important to give you a reassurance that you're normal. They're also helpful because they help you set goals. If you're a runner, you may not need information about go out and exercise 30 minutes a day, but you might need help about social engagement or encouraging you to sleep better. And so there are all kinds of tips along those lines that match your results, and then it serves you up recommendations based on your results.
Very cool. One of the reasons, and I would be interested, how many people would leave here tonight and go take this assessment to see how your brain health is doing? How many of you would take it? So I want you to report back, because I don't believe you. I don't believe you, because people have stigma about where they are, and they say, well, I didn't sleep, or I had a little bit too much wine. But our whole goal here is to look at the upward trajectory of brain health, and as we're talking about it with the composite, because we know that many things work together to do that. So I do hope you're right, that you're going to be proactive about it and see where you are. So let me know. I would love to have a lot of emails about this to say, guess what? I proved you wrong. I did it. I care about my brain, and this is where I am. we've talked to you about our Brain Health Index,
Yes.
which is very different. It's a composite score to look at how people can measure an upward trajectory versus where are you normal, that we say you are you, and this is where you are, and so the goal is to make you better year by year versus you're in the 10 percentile or 50 percentile. But one of the factors is connectedness. That we know, people can have memory problems, but connectedness contributes significantly to our ability for our brain to flourish. And our Surgeon General recently issued an advisory warning on the rise in loneliness and social isolation that has reached, really epidemic proportion. So what is AARP doing to address the fraying of our social fabric? And that 58% of American adults say they are lonely.
Yeah, it really is a crisis, and I'm so glad the Surgeon General has taken it up. AARP has been actually working on this for quite a few years because there is an epidemic of loneliness, and older people tend to be isolated. And you know that if you self-reported isolation correlates to a 50% greater risk for dementia. So it's a huge issue for the disease state. It's a huge issue for all kinds of health issues, not just Alzheimer's or dementia. It's incredibly pervasive. And so AARP has created lots of different efforts connect to effect, talking about purpose and creating recommendations. The Global Council on Brain Health did a specific report on the relationship of social connectedness to brain health. So we were one of the founders of the National Academy's study about social isolation that eventually led to the Surgeon General's report. It's an epidemic, and I know, Sandy, you and I were talking about for people of all ages. And COVID has been a tremendously disruptive force in all of our lives. The social isolation was this forced national experiment, right? And whatever the reasons and the need for doing so, it did spark this crisis that we're having to kind of rebuild. And I think your app, your program has this wonderful way of bringing the importance of social connectedness and doing something about it, and giving people tools that I think is going to be incredibly important. But often finding purpose in life and a purpose to connect people to each other. Like, I'm not particularly worried about this crowd because you're coming to a lecture on your brain health and you're with lots of people. So that they've probably got some of this down, right? Mm-hmm. But I bet everyone in this room knows someone that they could reach out to who might be a little different or might be a little lonely. And a simple phone call, even going to the market and sharing kindnesses to strangers has been shown to scientifically help your brain. So the power of all of you in the room to make a difference is pretty astounding. That's
so powerful to say what this group of seeing how we can make a difference with people that feel lonely that come across our path. So thank you for that message. I'm wondering if the testing that Staying Sharp did, if you saw any drop in the measures or whether people did fewer of the measurements during that time, and if you could see what happened, did people actually lose capacity? Is yours a longitudinal? Do people continue to look and then it keeps their profile?
Absolutely, it does. I don't know the answers because it's being studied and analyzed right now, and it's ongoing because we're trying to evaluate the long-term effects. Mm-hmm. But I will get back to you with that. But we did find very significant changes into it. We were thrilled that we had this digital platform because the idea, and I know you and I think a lot along these lines, we're trying to scale it up. It's very difficult for people in inner cities or rural communities or people who are socially economic challenged. So the idea is to have this digital platform to reach people. And so we were thrilled during COVID that it was live and people really, we have 2.5 million users. So it was definitely picked up. And so figuring out the long-term consequences, that data is going to be really useful. Maybe you'd be interested in analyzing some of it.
Yeah, we would. Okay. Definitely. That's my curious mind. One of the things I really appreciate, Sarah, that you have said is that we must change our belief that our healthcare system is impossible to change. We always think this is just how it is. So how does AARP work with physicians and professional organizations, and what changes do you feel like need to happen for the medical community to think about brain health and be proactive about it versus just be, and I actually didn't ask you to define brain health, and I meant to start, versus just look at the brain after something's already happened?
Well, it's really the ability to feel good and function well in your life. I think that's probably the simplest way of thinking about it. But one of the things that we do, and I know that with the American Academy of Neurology, they created a summit. It's great that neurologists are thinking about brain health because really they've been thinking about disease, right? And health happens everywhere outside of the healthcare system. It's what you do every day of your life. And so getting healthcare systems to think about prevention, risk reduction, this is not a small task. And so I think giving them the evidence that outcomes change as a result of people actually engaging in risk reduction. We know that if you can delay onset of dementia by just 5 years, you can cut the incidence of dementia in half. Giving them the facts and the evidence about that, and then really teaching medical students, nurse practitioners, the outcomes of it is different. And that just telling people go exercise, in our surveys, the healthcare profession knows that exercise and diet and sleep and social engagement is important. They all know this. But do they actually engage? Do they spend down and write a prescription for you to go out and exercise? Well, they're doing that in Europe. They're giving prescriptions to go exercise, right? Because they're catching on that these things are so effective. And so in order to change the health system, one of the things that we're doing is we're working with the CDC and the public health system and bringing the public health system and the healthcare system together so that you're hearing consistent messages and that you're showing the healthcare system with the evidence that you're developing, that others are developing, that yes, if you do these things, you will change the trajectory of your life and your health.
As we say, without brain health, you don't have health, so it really does change your trajectory so far. Do you feel like that we, as a society here, medicalize brain health and that maybe we should demedicalize it and take charge more for ourselves? But could it be that we don't, should you go to a physician and say, test my brain and tell me if I'm okay? Or what do you think we should do?
Well, I am a huge believer in consumer demand, right? That if consumers know what to do and they go and they ask for it, that they will drive it. That's why the pharmaceutical industry puts out those advertisements all the time so that y'all will go and ask for the purple pill, right? It's consumer demand will change. But first, consumers have to understand it actually is possible, that their cognitive decline isn't inevitable, and we have to get past that stigma with those things in order for them to really start demanding it. I don't know if you all know this, but in the Medicare system today, everybody is entitled to a free cognitive assessment as part of their annual wellness exam, but only 25% of the entire Medicare population knows about it or takes advantage of that. And then there's actually a code in Medicare for healthcare providers to get reimbursed to do an actual workup if they find something's amiss. So it's not that the system for healthcare doesn't already take care of it. It's designed only to catch those people who are the worst off and in disease. It's not designed to spend much time talking about the risk reduction, and that's what's got to change.
Whoa, no, I did not know that today it passed for a brain wellness checkup. By whom? But what doctors would do it? And who would be, because the measures they would use would be more about dementia, right?
Right. The MOCA assessment is part of the Affordable Care Act. It was part of the legislation that's, along with all of the other wellness aspects of it, that you should have a cognitive assessment.
Screen. Cool. So what do you think we could do? We said we know how to eat, we know we need to exercise, but we don't do it. What does AARP, how do they think about promoting? I thought it was interesting when they looked at smoking, they used the movie industry. It used to be sexy with people smoking, and then to stop, they made very active ways of showing, that people didn't do it, and it wasn't cool to do it. Where do you see brain health promotion best positioned for public change? What way can we get people to start thinking every single day, brain, let's do something to make you healthier?
So I do think that the movie industry and celebrities have a very important role because, like it or not, they are role models and people listen to them. And so I do think that that's important. But I also think that creating a movement, a consumer-based movement where people are actually demanding it, thinking it. I can see that some of this group is of the baby boomer age that has changed the country, right? You are not going to just passively sit back and take it, right?
Yeah.
You're going to change it because you've changed the world already. So I think that this building a consumer movement and really understanding that we have the power to change it ourselves is the way to go.
You are singing my song. Really, if people realize that they are the architects of their own brain and what we could do in the movement to demand it in the workplace, and not just, there's a lot of effort with mental health, but that's already focused on what's wrong with your brain versus how can I do capacity building to optimize what I'm doing. So what the data, we talked about dementia nearly doubling by 2040. And one of the things I'm curious about, does AARP feel like the motivator to get people to be excited about brain health is more about you can stave off dementia, or is it more about don't you want to be you but better year by year? Which way do you feel like motivates people, and what are they doing to help with the dementia and the trajectory there?
Well, I do think fear does motivate people. It really does. And because a lot of people are going about their lives in their 50s and they're like, la, 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 la. And then they forget where they put their keys and they start getting worried, right? I think that has a place. But it's much more attractive to go to something that's positive. It's much more exciting to think about your possibilities and thriving through your 100-year life. Right? So I think you can get people's attention, and we've found that people who are in caregiving roles, who are seeing this in their lives, it gives a window of opportunity. And so I think that capturing that window of opportunity and then getting them an immediate benefit so that they've realized, gee, if I just get a little more sleep, I can make a tremendous difference in my life. And I can tell you that, I told you that story about sleeping on my office floor because I had so many important things to do. Well, the things that I learned most important from the Global Council on Brain Health is just getting a little more sleep can make you immediately feel better. And you and I were talking about this, right?
Yes.
So if you get an immediate reward for treating yourself a little better and a little kinder, then that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So be easy on yourself, pick something easy to do, and then you're like, oh, well, if I can get 30 more minutes of sleep, maybe I can spend those 30 minutes going for a walk, right? And so I think that positive reinforcement's really important.
Yes, absolutely. I love that sleep is such an important thing, and it's cheap and it's free. So please, but don't go to sleep here because you don't want to miss a word that we're saying. So last year, unless something's changed, because you're on top of these things, CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, made an unprecedented decision that denied Medicare coverage of treatments that target amyloid for Alzheimer's. The cost of Alzheimer's is undeniable, and we need innovation. Where do you see the role and impact of non-pharmacological interventions to help people to support the families that are dealing with dementia?
Well, I believe that the first line of defense is non-pharmacological interventions, and that's what we should try first, and we absolutely should go with that. But I want to argue a little bit with your characterization. So CMS's decision was, I think, something that was spot on, because the drugs that are being developed, they're huge effectiveness questions, they're huge safety questions, they're huge cost questions, and so I think CMS did the exact right thing. FDA approved it under an experimental regulation. CMS actually approved it under something called coverage with evidence determination. And the point of that is that they would try it in very safe circumstances to make sure that it was safe for people, because the trials that had been run were not run in diverse communities, were only applicable for people with early onset. So there are a host of problems with those trials. So I think CMS did the exact right thing. There's a new drug coming out that Lilly's got that's got a little bit safer profile, but they're moving towards coverage. And there's no doubt everybody wants a medication that works. Everybody would love a cure, and AARP's been working to innovate and inspire cures. So don't get me wrong, it's probably in the end going to be medicine. But why pay millions, billions of dollars, have everybody pay billions of dollars when what we can do is sleep, eat, exercise, right? Like, it's crazy.
It is crazy, yes. Thank you, yes. Jennifer, I think that it's going to, I know that you all have lots of questions that you would like to ask, so I have 3 more cards, but I'm going to let the audience chip in here because there's so much food for thought that you've given us.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, so much. So I want everyone here to get your questions ready. We're going to have 2 mics going around the room. We've already been fielding a lot of virtual questions. So the first thing, we're going to start off with a question. As people are raising their hands, raise your hands, then we are going to, but I'm going to kick it off with this question first. It's so, everybody always wants to know, and you talk to this, what is it that I do? Like, what is the thing I do, or the 2 things or 3 things I do? And I loved how you talked about, really, you need to find the why, what motivates you, find how do you match activities to make that happen, find people for an accountability partner. You just talked about sleeping, eating right, exercising. But still, and we have questions in here tonight about, do I do crossword puzzles? I do, what is so this is a pervasive belief. If I do crossword puzzles are some magic. Everyone thinks they're this magic thing. And so I want you to talk to, how do you counter this? What do you, how do we really get people to start understanding that, you know what I mean? So This is actually for both of you too. Sarah, I want you to answer that first.
So we did a survey, because we're always asking people to have it be evidence-based. And that's the number one thing people think. If you do crossword puzzles and games, that's going to solve your problem. And if you love crossword puzzles, for heaven's sakes, please play crossword puzzles, because the more you play, the better you'll be at crossword puzzles. But it's not going to necessarily translate into improving the quality of your life long term. So if you like crossword puzzles, the key for cognitively stimulating activities is to keep upping the ante and keep discovering new things. It's that learning, it's the engagement, it's the challenge of your brain where you're making your neurons. And here's where the cognitive neuroscience should actually speak, and I should shut up.
No.
I appreciate what you said, because it is this, it does increase your vocabulary and some of that, but if you think about reasoning and decision making and the things that require student and the connection and the emotional balance, so you've got to think about where you spend your mental energy, and you want it to be your why, which I really appreciate when you started. So if you love it, then it does inspire you to keep going. But just think about your why and build, whatever you do builds those connections. Your brain is very specific.
Cool. We have a question? Yeah.
Do you think that faith, religion, going to church has an effect on brain health?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the reason that I think that is because it is something that gives you purpose in life. And it's a way of building connections, and it's a way of helping others. And so all of the things that happen in a faith-based community are incredibly reinforcing to the positive things that can happen around your brain health. So being in community with people, helping others, it's tremendously powerful. Even people just being together. We talked about social isolation. Just the fact of being together, you're finding out information. You may know the latest health thing. You might have an opportunity to say, oh, let's go do this exercise thing. And so when you're bringing people together with a common purpose, you're giving them all of these things, and they don't even know it's the medicine that they're receiving, right? And so that's why I think that there's so many wonderful things that can happen in a community. And if you're religious, that's fantastic and drives so many people. But if you're not, you can find it in other communities and in other ways too.
Thank you. Yes.
This is sort of for both of you, but what are your thoughts on engaging the population that's not in this room? What are creative ways to get there?
Why don't you start, because I love what we were talking about this morning.
So we couldn't agree more. One of our goals here at the Center for Brain Health is everybody counts or no one counts. So we have to make sure that we engage with every single person, the ones wherever they are. So we're starting some projects in some activities to learn from them, actually, in a partnership. We don't think we're going to teach them. We think we're going to learn as much from them. For example, Pleasant Grove is one of they call it a brain health desert almost, because there's so little there. So we're tackling that. And multi-generations to get them is how we feel like they've already taught us that's how you do it. Moms with children really care about that, and then they take care of their parents. So it's really an important, because if we can raise the bar for them to optimize their brain health and them to see their strength, the hopelessness will be changed, their trajectory will be changed, but it's within the community. So it wouldn't be people like us going in and saying, but it's them seeing and being the agents of change. And we're also working with Baylor, Scott and White, in their community health with people that are uninsured, so that we can develop health navigators, because they believe much more in not medicine and what are some things we can do. So we're very active about that, and as we learn from them, then we're going to be able to spread that around the world too. So yes, absolutely. Everyone counts or no one counts. And Dr. Gamino's here. We've been working with middle school children, many of them in the most under-resourced areas, and by teaching them innovative thinking and skills, they've been able to get to the level of private school educated kids and double their graduation rates and their number of AP classes. So the brain is the most amazing organ if you teach people the tools to use it versus be stuck with, I can't do this, I can't get an education. There's so much we can do. So absolutely, that's a big mission of ours.
Yeah, and I would just add the intergenerational approach I think is incredibly important. And I think that actually engaging employers and businesses, this is another thing that we were talking about. It's in the interest of employers to have a healthy, vital workforce. And as an aging population, their employees are aging. And so trying to bring that to where you spend most of your time, which is at work. Once you get out of school, your employer and the places that you work and live are the places. And so in order to reach the people that aren't in this room, we have to fan out and think about where are people living, where are they living, because that is where we can make the systems change so that everybody can do it. And the thing I loved what you said is that if you learn from the communities, the resilience that they've built in other communities which are socioeconomically deprived, like they've been figuring this out and they've got lessons. And so if we can combine and learn from them and not like come down with, I'm going to tell you the 6 pillars and listen to me, right? But instead, how is it working in your space? What is it that works for you? And then we take that back.
Great question.
Yeah, I had a question on the 6 pillars. And what research or what studies have confirmed that perhaps meditation is part of that pillar or pillars?
So the Global Council on Brain Health did a study on mental well-being. And we looked at common ways that people can help restore their mental well-being. So meditation, and we actually had people from Japan and India talking about this who has, a lot of experience in meditation. Where it helps you manage and get in touch with yourself. So I don't claim to be an expert in meditation, but I will say that they were talking about the components of meditation and that you don't have to go up on a mountaintop and be a yogi in order to reap the benefits, that small little interventions in which you breathe can make a tremendous difference. And so I recommend the Global Council's report to that, where we talk a lot about the heavy, rigorous science around it, to get more information about it. But one of the things I was so impressed about is it's not some far-off, unattainable thing that a lot of people think when they hear meditation. It's simple things you can incorporate in your life.
And and let me add, one of the things I love about meditation is that just 5 minutes of meditation, you can feel the effects, and it teaches people they have control over their brain. When you're the most anxious, and we've worked with law enforcement officers, and just by teaching them before they go from one to the next, just doing a little meditation to calm the brain, they can prepare the brain and they can feel the change, so the emotional balance that comes. And you feel it, so it teaches you that you are the architect of your brain, because meditation is what you choose to do. So that's why it's a powerful kind of trigger for me, for people to become aware of what they can do.
Okay, while we're getting into, go.
Sorry, has AARP done any studies on the impact of social media or screen time on the longevity of life health, specifically after the age of 50? Obviously, we've kind of an epidemic of social media and screen time for my generation and under, but that's it.
It's a great question, and the evidence is still developing in our social connectedness, because there are some people who are isolated and they're getting some social connectedness, so that's not all negative. There are some positive results found in numerous studies. I think the question is compared to what, and if you have and need social interaction, it can have beneficial effects. And the jury is still out. Actually, I was talking, Sanjay Gupta is somebody who we've worked with extensively, and he's been doing a deep dive into this. So I don't think the answer is it's all good or it's all bad, and it's developing. But we are in the midst of a radical experiment. There are so many people who are experiencing this to the isolation of other kinds of things. We've got an entire generation. So it's something that we should be paying a lot of attention to. So I'd say the jury's out. AARP is absolutely following and studying this. But we should be thinking a lot about how it's changing the minds of people.
I'm going to take a question from the virtual audience. What do we need to do for the brain health of caregivers to, number one, for their own brain health, but also to mitigate against burnout, depression, caregiver stress and depression?
Well, caregiving is a huge emphasis of AARP, and so we know that caregivers are particularly vulnerable, but they're also particularly paying attention. And so it's a wonderful opportunity that if with respite and giving information at the right time, that it's tremendously helpful. But we know that caregivers, particularly those who are caring for those living with dementia, have enormous stress and report just real challenges in their own brain health. What was the second part of that question?
Well, I guess that, it's like, what do we need to do to help support them so they don't get burned out, so they don't have depression, caregivers-related stress?
So one, we have to figure out ways to support them. Two, we have to figure out ways of getting respite. Three, it's trying to give them the resources. So AARP does have a lot of resources for caregivers, and I would highly recommend checking it out to try to do it. A lot of group support can be very helpful with those kinds of things. But caregivers, my heart is with them because I've been there.
Yeah. And I can hardly wait to share with you. Audette's going to share tomorrow, because that's a big focus of what we're doing. And we know that caregivers can lose significant cognitive ability just from the stress of taking care of the individual. So focusing on their own brain health really matters to be able to go the whole route, and the staying connectedness to have emotional balance. So we've got some projects that I can't wait to share with you tomorrow.
And I am excited to hear about what we know is, and what caregivers often don't realize, is that when they take time for themselves, when they get lessons and management and tools in hand, they might feel a little guilty taking off. The care that they're able to give will keep their loved ones out of long-term care facilities, will facilitate a much better experience all the way around. And so it's like that you hear when you're flying, put the oxygen mask on yourself. Women aren't particularly necessarily thinking this way, right? But put the oxygen mask on yourself so you can help everybody else.
Thank you. Okay, a question.
First of all, I'd like to thank you both. It's a marvelous, marvelous evening. I'd like to suggest, as you were speaking before, though, about having a way of influencing the healthcare system, the education of medical students. I do some research with an organization here in town, a large one, and I'm not as optimistic as you that everyone in this audience is going to go back and ask their doctors questions. So I work with patient safety, patient expectations, risk reductions, outcomes, optimizing health for people. And one of the things that we're doing is we're developing patient-family advisory councils. And I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they are a wonderful vehicle for helping healthcare institutions, clinics, your doctor, and many of the doctors, have these multiple affiliations. We're working with 339 clinics of maybe 1, 2, or 3 doctors in each, and trying to put this together. And what it does is it begins to impact the physician and the organization, whether it's Baylor, UT Southwestern, Methodist, TR's, Texas Health Resources, any of those, to better understand what our expectations are as patients. We don't all speak out, and if you have an opportunity to participate in one of these patient-family advisory councils, I would certainly recommend that you or someone in your family, because they make a difference and they help the physician to better understand what we need.
I absolutely agree. It's a form of advocacy for the people who are using the healthcare system, and you have to have that knowledge and the sort of oomph, the ability to challenge a provider, as much as we love healthcare providers, so that they give back their best, because now they've been informed what they need to know. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Okay, okay, we've got more questions.
Just real quickly.
Yes.
You spoke about assessments and its importance. Could you just very quickly, I assume it's online. Is it interactive? How long does it take? How do you give feedback, both of you?
So I think her assessment tool is very different than our assessment tool at AARP. So AARP's digital test, you can take it within like 30 minutes. And then after that, 30 days later, you can see if what you've been doing has been effective. So perhaps you've gotten a score that shows, that gives you recommendations about getting better sleep. And then you try to do the sleeping, and then 30 days later you measure to see whether or not you've actually made a dent in the way that you're feeling, in the way that you're performing. So there is feedback, and you get immediate feedback once you complete the assessment. But I would recommend not doing it when you're tired or you're scared or whatever. But it's a very easy, kind of fun design to be an easy opportunity to take a snapshot. And it's not meant to be a medical assessment at all. It is meant to give you information based on where you are and what you're doing at that moment.
I always recommend people approach these performance-based assessments with a sense of curiosity and like open-mindedness of just tell me about let me see what my snapshot is today. But I think if people were more curious about what they're doing and how their habits impact their brain health, I think it's a much more open-minded outside of fear. Yep. So for what that's worth. Okay, we've got one last question before I send it back over to Sandy. Go for it.
Is there anything happening globally at a federal level or state level in the continuing education process? We tend to think a lot about formal public education ending at 18 and then secondary education, maybe by the time you're 30, or there are a few more that linger on, but I don't know if there is some sort of continuous education. It should never stop at 50 or 60 or 80 or 100. And we don't have, or I'm not seeing any support for that. So is there any model or anything that you're aware of that is there in making that an open and accepted opportunity for everyone at any age?
Yeah, there is a movement afoot, lifelong learning. There's an entire system of OSHR, lifelong learning. But you would be amazed if you look at your public institutions that older adults we've been advocating for this for AARP for years, and in many places this is true. You can go to your university for free as an older adult in your community colleges and get a degree. Like, take the physics classes that you avoided when you were 17. Right?
Two of us at this table just got our masters over 65.
Fantastic. Woo-hoo! But the other thing, so there are lots of formal opportunities, but I guess one thing I really want to say is it doesn't have to be a formal learning opportunity, right? It's what you're learning in your church. It's what you're learning in your advocacy work. It's what you're learning in your life. And it's those kinds of opportunities where you're learning and growing. And that's why a lot of people say never retire. Not only because you can't afford to, but because the longer you keep engaged in life, the better off you're going to be.
And it's what you're learning here tonight too. So I don't want to, you guys don't forget to write down your takeaways of what you learned tonight and the big things that you're going to take to be actionable for you in your life. Okay?
So we don't have time for any more questions, but wouldn't it be great to spend all night with Sarah? Is it? Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
But I want her to repeat what her 3 takeaways are real quick, so you make sure that you leave here and you know what they are.
Believe in science. That's the first from a society,
Yes.
right? But the why. Think about why brain health is important to you. Set yourself a reasonable, achievable goal that you can have for success. And then do the step-by-step approach and get somebody to help you keep accountable.
I love that. Our brain is the engine that drives everything that we do. We're so glad that you joined us tonight. I think we're so excited to be able to have the opportunity, Sarah, to see the amazing work that you're leading at AARP, not only across the nation, but really across the world as we think about other countries, so that we can live longer, but have our peak brain performance last till the last breath we have. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.